Welcome back to the Docker with .NET section of the Getting Started with Docker course. In this lesson, we're going to be covering adding a Docker file after we've already had a .NET Core application built. So let's create a new .NET Core application. We're going to create an ASP.NET Core web application. We're going to call this without Docker and without Docker app. We'll hit create. We'll do our .NET Core, ASP.NET Core 2.2, web application. We're going to uncheck the box for enable Docker support. So we're going to start without Docker support. And we hit create. This will create our application for us. And notice there is no Docker file down here. So it's still restoring our application. So we'll wait for just a second for this to start. Notice also we have in our dropdown IIS Express and without Docker are our two launch options, and that's it. We don't have any other options. So now that we've got this started, we can still kick it off if we want to with IIS Express or on its own with that command line version. That's this one right here, which I kind of like the command line version. You can see what's going on. Notice the 200 request down here. And we can go to a different page and notice it hit that and it did a 304 and all the rest. So it's working behind the scenes, which I find kind of fascinating to see what's going on. We can close it down, and now you want to add Docker support. And this is going to seem rather anticlimactic. We right-click on our project. We're going to say Add Docker support. We want to target Linux. That's it. Now we have Docker support. And notice that file looks a lot like the file from our last project. It's just this changed everything to say without support. Now, one more thing that I didn't cover in the last video that does make a difference is if we change from debug mode to release mode. So debug mode is all about we want to actually debug our application. Release mode is we want to prepare for actually launching our application in the real world. We can then run with Docker, or we can even say start without debugging. Let's just run Docker in release mode. It's going to do things a little bit different. So if we go to output, notice that right now, and it's scrolling. But it's on step 9 of 19. Remember it said step 1 of 6, and that was all the steps it did? Well, now it's doing all 19 steps. So there's 19 steps in this file. It's doing all of them, and then it's launching our application. Now when it launches, we get our web application. It's still running. It still does all the same things as before, but now it's in a container. Notice the container. It's Eager Goldstein is our container. And we can just verify that that's the correct one by saying docker ps-a. And it's been up for 28 seconds. And it's Eager Goldstein. So that is in fact the container we're looking at. And we go to Files and go to App. Notice the files are different this time. Now we see our DLL without docker.dll. And that's what we're running against. That's what we're doing the .NET against. So there isn't those source files here. And that was the difference that I was missing in the last video was I did it in debug mode. And that's why I was like, why are the source files there? The reason why is It said add Docker support. That's it. That's all you have to do in order to get Docker up and running. So with that, we've covered the basics of how to work with Docker and .NET. There's not a lot to it. It's pretty much just runs out of the box with some simple setup. So let's go into our conclusion and then move on to our next section.